the market working in ideas of record U.S. corn yields, which could push ending stocks back over 2 billion bushels. Plus, Brazil's corn crop also looks like a record.
So concerned about their farm finances right now, they really just can't catch a break. It's not just because corn prices are below break even for most. It's the fact input prices are so high. In fact, input prices could be even higher this fall.
It started without much notice. Just a small shift in global trade routes, a slight change in what buyers were looking for. Then, a troubling silence. No new orders, no renewed contracts. By the time farmers across the American Midwest realized what was happening, it was already too late. The world's largest corn export system was grinding to a halt. For decades, the United States dominated the global corn trade, exporting billions of dollars worth of grain to countries across Asia, Europe, and beyond. But in just a few short years, that long-held leadership began to crumble. What was once the heartbeat of rural prosperity is now at the center of a growing economic crisis. All the while, a quiet rival had been steadily rising, building partnerships, investing in technology, and redefining the rules of global agriculture. We'll reveal who that competitor is shortly. But first, if you find this kind of deep dive content helpful, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us reach more people. Back in the heartland, across Iowa, Nebraska, and Illinois, signs of economic distress now stretch across the countryside. Combines that once harvested golden fields now sit idle, gathering dust on gravel driveways. So, what changed? At the core of the issue is price. The average value of corn has dropped to around $3.50 per bushel, a level not seen since 2016. For many farmers, that price doesn't even cover the cost to grow the crop. This isn't just a bad season, it's an unsustainable situation. Over 2 million tons of corn, once destined for global markets, have instead been rerouted back to domestic storage. Ports like New Orleans are overflowing with unsold grain. Export deals worth millions have fallen through, leaving growers with full silos and empty pockets. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It helps keep this kind of reporting going. The impact isn't limited to the farms themselves. In places like Indiana, where agriculture powers local economies, the downturn is sending shockwaves. Every canceled contract and every returned shipment means lost revenue, vanishing jobs, and fading small towns. For years, American corn exports were shielded by trade deals and buyer loyalty. But now, multiple factors have converged into a perfect storm. Foreign tariffs, rising transport costs, shifting consumer values, and outdated certification processes. Each of these problems on its own might have been manageable. Together, they're reshaping the global grain market. Interestingly, one of the earliest signs of this shift didn't come from Washington, but from Ottawa. While US agriculture was navigating uncertainty, Canada was quietly building a new system, one that promised full transparency, environmental accountability, and traceability from the field all the way to the port. That system, known as Prairie Trace, is powered by blockchain technology and quickly caught the attention of international buyers. Each shipment through Prairie Trace comes with a digital record, proof of non-GMO status, carbon footprint data, and full tracking of where the grain has been. This wasn't just about ticking boxes for regulators. It was exactly what buyers in the European Union, Japan, and South Korea had been demanding. While American exporters focused on scale and volume, Canadian officials were busy finalizing high-value, long-term trade agreements. In markets like Tokyo and Seoul, Canadian grain cooperatives landed multi-year deals by offering what modern buyers now prioritize: clean, green, and fully traceable products. And the results were swift. Within weeks, Japan significantly shifted its corn imports from US suppliers to certified Canadian cooperatives. South Korea followed, citing lower risk and better compliance with local regulations. These changes didn't make front-page news, but they marked the start of what analysts now call a structural realignment of the global corn trade. The numbers tell the story. Spot corn prices in the US Midwest dropped to $3.45 per bushel, close to a 10-year low. Meanwhile, Canadian corn from Manitoba was fetching $4.20 per bushel, driven by the premium attached to its eco-friendly certifications. That's a price gap of nearly 22%. For global buyers under pressure to meet strict regulations, the choice became clear. Even though Canadian corn was more expensive up front, it reduced compliance risks, sped up customs checks, and helped preserve reputations, critical factors in international trade. And things only got tougher for U.S. exporters. Following a 2025 White House directive, inspection and certification fees surged. Shipping costs for grain on Chinese-manufactured vessels through the Gulf of Mexico rose by 25%, adding nearly $900 million in annual expenses. Then in March, the Federal Grain Inspection Service raised its testing fees by almost 40%. Each test now costs $81, up from $57. These fees trickled down to farmers and cooperatives, squeezing profits even further. Meanwhile, in South Korea, a quiet but significant signing ceremony took place in early spring. The event marked a 5-year grain import agreement between one of South Korea's largest feed mill companies and a Canadian agricultural network based in Ontario. Under this deal, Canadian, not American, corn would supply a growing share of the country's non-GMO, low-emission feed grain needs. And that was just the beginning. Over the next 2 months, similar deals were signed in Japan, Taiwan, and several European countries. These buyers weren't just looking for grain, they were looking for trust, traceability, and transparency. By mid-year, trade analysts had started referring to a growing trust gap in the global corn market. This wasn't about yield or quantity, it was about compliance, documentation, and predictability. Canada, with its advanced tracking systems and centralized regulations, gave buyers peace of mind that every shipment could clear strict customs checks. The US, by contrast, was still relying on a fragmented, outdated system, spread across multiple agencies, using inconsistent testing standards and aging software. For international buyers under pressure to meet their own national regulations, doing business with the US was starting to feel like a risk they couldn't afford. At the same time, new regulations were accelerating the shift. In February 2025, Mexico implemented an official ban on genetically modified corn for human consumption. Just weeks later, major feed processors in Japan and parts of Europe began adding similar clauses to their purchasing contracts. Considering that over 92% of corn grown in the US is genetically modified, American corn was effectively ruled out of many international markets. Meanwhile, Canada, thanks to its early investment in non-GMO seed programs and certification systems, became the obvious alternative for global buyers. The decision was now straightforward: source corn from Canada and stay compliant or risk costly delays, rejections, and penalties by importing US grain. While American farmers watched their prices crash and their markets disappear, Canadian growers quietly entered a boom period. In provinces like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, corn prices stayed above $4 per bushel, boosted by low-carbon incentives and streamlined export procedures. Buyers were even willing to pay a 20% premium for corn with full Prairie Trace certification. The perception gap between the two countries was growing fast. US corn was now seen as risky, prone to inspection issues and potential environmental violations, while Canadian corn was viewed as a reliable, responsible choice that checked every regulatory box. Back in the Midwest, the mood darkened. In Iowa, farmers reported holding more than 2.5 billion bushels of unsold corn, the highest figure in 6 years. As temperatures rose, so did storage costs and the risk of spoilage. In parts of Nebraska, local co-ops stopped buying corn altogether. Their silos were full. Ethanol plants, which typically absorb excess supply, began scaling back operations. One major facility in Columbus, Nebraska, cut night shifts by 60%, leaving over 100 workers without work. And this wasn't just a string of isolated events. It signaled the breakdown of what had once been a dependable safety valve for the corn industry. In Illinois and elsewhere, the consequences were immediate and severe. A third straight year of historically low water levels on the Mississippi River disrupted barge traffic. Grain shippers had to lighten loads and shorten tow lengths just to get through. Each ton of corn now cost $20 more to ship to Gulf ports. In some cases, delays stretched up to 15 days. These backups caused grain to pile up, strained already limited storage capacity, and led to serious financial stress for co-ops. Some teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Others stopped offering forward contracts altogether. Even basic decisions, like when to harvest, whether to sell, or how much to store, became deeply uncertain. By summer 2025, one message was clear across global commodity markets. Grain is no longer valued by volume alone. Today, environmental credentials, traceability, and data transparency play an equally critical role in determining a crop's market value. Buyers aren't just purchasing corn anymore, they're buying reputational security. For companies and governments striving to meet climate targets, every shipment is under scrutiny. Every certificate matters. In this new environment, Canadian corn exports have become the gold standard for what qualifies as a globally acceptable product. The true tipping point came when carbon markets and agricultural supply chains began to merge. In Europe, a revised compliance framework called REEDU introduced mandatory tracking of life cycle emissions for all agricultural imports. These rules require proof that every step of a product's journey, from seed to final delivery, meets strict environmental standards. Canada responded by launching a centralized emissions platform that tracks and shares carbon data in real time. Thanks to this innovation, Canadian grain shipments are now clearing customs up to 20 days faster than their US counterparts. In a world where time is money, that speed is a huge advantage. Meanwhile, the US continues to rely on outdated, fragmented systems, often requiring manual paperwork and multiple layers of verification. Each delay adds costs, demurrage charges, rejected shipments, or contract penalties. Some importers have begun baking these risks into their agreements, effectively lowering the price of US corn before it even ships. Others have simply stopped considering American suppliers altogether. For many global buyers, it's now easier and safer to work with Canadian cooperatives that guarantee traceability, emissions tracking, and regulatory compliance in one seamless package. As more countries adopt similar environmental standards, the demand for these capabilities is growing. Feed mill operators in Europe and Asia now routinely prioritize grain that can verify both its source and carbon footprint. This trend is reshaping procurement strategies across the entire agriculture industry. In some cases, even government contracts are tied to emissions thresholds, meaning only low-carbon corn can be used in national food or livestock programs. In this new landscape, Canadian corn is more than just a crop. It's a tool for meeting broader environmental, social, and governance ESG goals. And what used to be niche requirements are now mainstream business expectations, from Bangkok to Brussels. For US producers, the consequences are serious. With the majority of American corn still made up of genetically modified hybrids, most of it doesn't meet the import criteria for key global markets. And even when the product is high quality, the absence of a unified traceability and compliance system puts it at a competitive disadvantage. Buyers can't afford to gamble on products that might be rejected or tied to regulatory failure. It's no longer a question of whether the corn is good, it's about whether the corn can prove that it meets evolving global standards. More often than not, US corn just can't provide that proof. While this shift unfolds, Canadian trade officials have been moving with strategic precision. In March 2025, Canada signed the Canada-South Korea Organic Equivalency Arrangement, allowing certified organic Canadian grain to move freely into one of Asia's most tightly regulated markets. Within 3 weeks, a cooperative in Ontario had secured a 5-year contract with a major South Korean processor. That new trade agreement came with guaranteed volumes, regular environmental audits, and options for annual renewal, built entirely around shared commitments to emissions tracking and traceability standards. No such equivalent deal currently exists for US grain. Saskatchewan in particular has taken full advantage of these shifting trade dynamics. By leveraging favorable trade conditions and the weaker Canadian dollar, the province began exporting certified non-GMO corn to buyers in Japan and the Netherlands. These shipments, backed by carbon footprint documentation and non-GMO certifications, received expedited customs processing, skipping the extra inspections and fees that are often applied to US grain. According to internal reports from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, a number of Canadian exporters are now actively reducing their reliance on the U.S. market. Instead, they're developing supply chains that completely bypass American ports, shipping through Pacific and Atlantic terminals that connect directly to stable, high-demand regions overseas. This shift isn't just symbolic. It marks a deeper realignment in how North American agriculture operates. While Canada's grain supply chains are becoming more efficient and diversified, the U.S. system is facing mounting bottlenecks. Rail shipping costs are unpredictable. River barge traffic is limited by persistently low water levels. Export inspections vary widely by state, adding more uncertainty for shippers. The end result is a growing divide, not just in price, but in overall reliability. And global buyers are taking notice. As they redirect their contracts, investments, and long-term partnerships toward Canadian suppliers, the foundation of U.S. dominance in the corn export market continues to crack.